Now the 16th of September 2020, and we've just passed the 19th anniversary of the September 11th attacks. Now, without question, this is one of the most documented events of modern history in terms of documentaries, films, books. Um, and I just want to reflect on why it still resonates 19 years later. Next year, of course, will be a big anniversary, the 20th anniversary. But maybe it's because of my interests in news. Um, but every September 11th, it is very much on my mind, and this year's been no exception. I watched United '93 by Paul Greengrass. It's a film I've seen many times, but it's if you haven't seen it, it's about United '93, the plane in which the passengers famously fought back. Paul Greengrass has a very hard-hitting style, very intense style of filmmaking. He also directed Bloody Sunday and Oma, which are set around the Northern Ireland Troubles. But United '93, I think one technique he uses is not to take well-known actors, the relatively unknown actors, and in this case they look remarkably like the people they were portraying, but very intense style, almost real time. Hard to describe it. If you see it, you'll know what I mean. Anyway, um, about the day itself, I think there's a number of reasons why it still resonates. This year, of course, because of coronavirus, commemorations have been scaled back, but there was still some commemorations. I know that Joe Biden and Mike Pence put politics aside and bumped elbows at the commemoration at Ground Zero. Um, 19 years is quite a long time. I mean, that's to put that in context, that's like someone's entire childhood and teenage years combined. It's almost 2 decades. It's a long time. In some ways, September 11th was another era in the sense that it was before social media as we know it today. It was before smartphones really took off in a big way. And yet it was the beginning of the 21st century. I mean, okay, the decade may have technically begun on the 1st of January 2000 or the 1st of January 2001, depending what way you look at it. But I think it's fair to say that September 11th was, for many people, kind of symbolic of the opening of the century. What I find intriguing about this is that I remember the event well. I was 16 at the time, and I remember seeing it on the news. I remember the feelings at that time. I didn't follow the news the way I do now, but I do remember a fear just about the state of the world and what was going to happen. It was a very surreal feeling, very surreal. But what's interesting about 9/11 is I know there are millennials who are younger than me that can't connect with this event on a first-hand basis. I mean, in the sense that I don't mean first-hand in the sense of knowing anyone. I didn't have any personal connections. I didn't know anyone who died or anything like that. But um, first-hand in the sense of remembering the event. But then again, when I was born in the late 80s, there were a lot of disasters in the UK. I was 4 years old when the Lockerbie bombing happened. Now, my parents happen to live near Lockerbie. I've been to that memorial a few times, and that's quite poignant. Um, but younger millennials won't remember the news footage in the same way. Um, they'll know of the event, but I don't know if they'll be able to really understand the sort of feelings that people around the world had at that time. It's a strange thought to think that on one hand, this was very much our generation, our modern era, and yet it was just before, like I say, the rise of social media and the modern world as we understand it now. So it could also maybe be seen as the end of the old era, although I don't see it that way, but just in terms of the social media and so on. So it's interesting to place 9/11 in a frame of time. Of course, it wasn't the only significant event of 2001, although it's really the only thing the year's remembered for. Just off the top of my head, 2001 was the foot and mouth crisis here in the UK, which was devastating for the agriculture. It was a big Indian earthquake that year. Um, Thousands of people died. Well, one of the worst earthquakes of modern times, actually. And there were other things that happened in the year 2001. Um, but it was such a poignant event. And it's not just this place in history, it remains the deadliest terrorist attack in history collectively. But it's also the symbolism of it. I mean, you can never, no matter how many times you see those images of the planes going into the Twin Towers, they just resonate so deeply. And there is an interesting thing about 9/11. One of the main sites, we know, of course, of the four hijacked aircraft. We know of the Twin Towers. I feel the Pentagon is sometimes overlooked. I mean, over 170 people died at that site, but we only really have that CCTV footage and the smoke rising from the building. I think it's sometimes an overlooked part of 9/11 in some ways. As far as I know, there hasn't been any films made around the Pentagon side of the attack. Um, so that's interesting because I think just the visual image of the planes going into those towers is just so haunting. I would call it but I would say older millennials are the 9/11 generation. Such was I guess for Americans who came of age during Pearl Harbor, it's something similar. I would say my generation, I would call it the 9/11 generation. Such was the impact it had. I mean, there have been deadlier events since. Uh, there's been many natural disasters that have claimed far more lives. Coronavirus in the United States has killed around 50 times plus as many people as September 11th. So in that sense, there have been many worse events, many more lives impacted in other events. Nevertheless, we shouldn't just look at 9/11 as the 3,000 people who died. There were many others who were injured, many who suffered PTSD, many families. So actually, in that sense, it goes into tens of thousands of victims. But I don't think in the year 2101, on the centenary of 9/11, I don't think it will really have faded. I mean, obviously, it will be further back in time. There'll probably be no survivors still alive at that time. I doubt I will be alive, but it will still be significant because this was a world-changing event. I don't think it will be forgotten, and I don't think it should be. This century we are almost certainly going to see bigger events, but I don't think you could downplay the significance of 9/11, and I don't think it should ever be forgotten because I don't want to be overly sentimental with this, but I was looking at tribute videos and photographs and some of the people who were involved, and the youngest victim, and this is something I only discovered this year, was a little girl by the name of Christine Hansen. She died with her parents when they're playing American Airlines Flight 175, I believe it was, crashed into the North Tower. She was 2 years old. And at the September 11th Museum, I think it's called the 9/11 Museum actually, there's a little Peter Rabbit from the famous British writer Beatrix Potter, the Peter Rabbit character. This little girl, she was Korean American, born in the Chinese Year of the Rabbit, and that was her favorite toy. But if you look at the image of that family, it's just so sad because the little girl looked so happy on her way to Disneyland, just totally innocent. And 8 children died that day. Most of the victims were adults, office workers, people on flight for various reasons, visiting family members and so on. But 8 children died, and um, you'd have to be made of stone to see those images and not feel emotional. Um, I mean, 2 years old. She was born the year I visited the United States, and it's like the contrast of pure innocence and thinking of the hijackers, pure evil. But anyway, I won't span this out too much. 19 years. I think this year is significant because of the. It's different in the sense of what coronavirus has done. Next year is going to be a big one, I think, with the 20th anniversary. Then after that, it's going to get further and further back in history, but it should never be forgotten. Because remember, there's surviving family members out there that still have to deal with this all the time.